Hi, so I want to talk about physics, psychedelic experiences, meditation, and stuff like that. This is also an experiment to see if I can, reach some folks and also about just recording videos on my phone and things like that. But mostly, this is completely self-indulgent because I got some crazy ideas and I need to process them. I'm a verbal processor. So I had an experience the other night when I was in meditation, and I could see how do I describe this? Okay, so when I practice meditation, I do like Kundalini breathing exercises. And in fact, if you're interested in this, I do the meditations that are put out by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And if you're gonna start with his stuff, I recommend doing like the water breathing and some of the other entry level things. He has a recommended list of what to do, and definitely stick to his list. Because if you try to get into like the blessing of the energy centers or the time space meditations before you're ready, it won't work, and you'll just get frustrated. Trust me, because I'm an asshole and I didn't stick to what he recommended. I tried to do things out of order and I just got frustrated. So I went back to the beginning and tried it over again. It's been a little more than a month now that I've been doing this every day. And also, just full disclosure, in the past I have had experiences with mushrooms. I worked with, well, it's a long time ago, but also when I was a kid, I had meningitis, and I'm not sure how that affected my brain also. And I've been a meditator for years now, like 10, 12 years now. And also, yeah, and I've been a student of physics and metaphysics and quantum physics for years, and psychology and psychiatry and philosophy is just like, what I study on my own. So a lot of this kind of stuff kind of makes sense to me. I also studied Rosicrucianism for several years, and I'm a non-practicing Master Mason. So, oh, and I've also studied Kabbalah, and I was raised as a fundamentalist Christian, but I had a lot of experience in the Pentecostal church and doing deep prayer sessions and trying to learn how to speak in tongues. And so my spiritual walk has been kind of all over the place. So anyway, I say all that because a couple days ago in my meditation, I was taken out of my body again, and which happens fairly regularly for me. The most powerful one, and the one that I think really changed my life, was maybe back in December, it was before Christmas. And I got out of my body. Normally when I get out of my body, I can wander around the house and look at things and maybe travel to different places, a little bit of astral projection and stuff like that. But this time I was just having a blast. I got out of my body and I had lived several different lifetimes. I was an aborted fetus 5 or 6 times at least. I was a chipmunk. I decided it would be interesting to go live in a chipmunk's body for a while. So I lived a chipmunk's lifetime. And I know this sounds completely bizarre, but to folks who practice deep meditation and who've had some experiences with psychedelics, you'll know that this is pretty common. But what I saw the other night is really stuck in my head, and it's this. Maybe I should back up a little bit, because a few months ago I had a revelation. I had another understanding during my meditation that everything, all of reality is just a bubbling up of chaos. Everything is chaos. And what we do, and by we is in the broadest sense, we is anything that has even the most remote, thinly defined, barely recognizable sense of awareness. Okay, so that would be all the way down to the atomic level. I'm not going to say the subatomic level because of another philosophy and theory that I have, because I think that based on the information that I have and the things that I've seen and experienced, I think that the atom is the first level of it's the element. It's the fundamental element of awareness. Yes, it's the fundamental element of awareness within this reality frame. Yeah, I think that feels the most true. Ed, I might as well open that can of worms too. So one of the things that I had experienced in the past was during one of my meditations, I was taken out of the body and I was taken on this really broad, it happened 2 times. One time I was taken on a broad experience outside of the body, where I was taken out into the cosmos. And I was allowed to live through the life cycle of a galaxy, and I lived through the life cycle of a solar system. And then a sun and a planet, and I just, I became all these sorts of things, and I lived through that. And then another time, I dove deep inside and went kind of in the other direction, all the way down to the quantum level, and I was able to I became an atom. And I just kind of like circled in and out of energy, and I became life, and I went back down to the atom, and I was just like flowing in and out all the time. And, but what was interesting about that time is when I got down to the atomic level, and I started to go inside an atom, I became what you think of as a string, like a string theory. And it's interesting because I hadn't been studying up on string theory at all, but then I felt myself being one of these strings that was like moving and changing and kind of morphing all the time. And it was a constant, like a vibration that was always going, but I could see like the other strings around and see what was going on. And what I came to realize, I don't know if it was something I realized on my own or if I had a guide and it explained it to me, but the realization was there, and it was that what strings are is, how do you describe this? Okay, do you ever, like, if you look at bubbles, you're blowing bubbles and you've got like 4 or 5 bubbles that are together, right? Or if you look at, bubbles in your sink, where 2 bubbles come together, there's that line that goes through them, okay? And, it's an apparent line, but the string in the string theory is that line, okay? But what's happening is that what the bubbles are is a potential. They could grow into potential universes, and infinite universes as they kind of sparkle up, like a effervescence. It's like this effervescence of potential that kind of manifests up from the quantum field, and that's what those strings are. And then they kind of burst out and they become these bubbles, and they divide out, and then one comes over here and becomes the components of an atom. They become the energy potentials at the atomic level, And those are the sorts of things that we see. But then there's another one that breaks off in another direction and becomes something else, and that would be like antimatter or something like that. And that's been a profound idea that's been with me for a while. And I've had a few other experiences and seen some other interesting things in the meantime. But what happened the other day is what really floored me, because it took several other ideas that I've had and sort of codified them into this one thing. And this is the part that I could actually use some positive feedback. Maybe forward this to somebody who's smarter than me, which shouldn't be hard to find. But I don't know. I'd like some feedback on this. But I have this idea that we exist here on what we think of as the material plane. But there is no material as such, which I think most physicists would agree with. If you zoom in tight enough on anything, then you'll find out that there's no phone here. If my skin, my face, there's everything's atomic and energy potential, and even the things that we think of as matter aren't matter as such. There is no matter when you go down to the tightest level. And what I saw is that everything comes together at this point in time, okay? And there's an important theory to wrap your head around about space-time versus time-space, okay? So when we look around, we see space-time, and in space-time, space is infinite and time is linear. But on the reverse of that, then time is infinite and space is linear. It's kind of hard to understand because we mostly have our awareness in space-time, so it's easier to conceptualize. But where we live is right on the cusp of that. And it's easy to think that we live further over into space-time than we actually do, when the reality is that we're right on the bleeding edge, completely on the bleeding edge. And I say this because what I've come to understand is that what we evolved to do, not humans, but anything that has any kind of sentience or the loosest definition of awareness down to the atomic level, what that has evolved to do is to derive order out of chaos, right? So what that means is that if you go into the woods, and order into chaos is a constantly changing thing, okay? Because if you look at the laws of thermodynamics, they basically describe how things that are into existence slowly go out of existence, and energy transfers to one thing to another, whatever. But there's nothing in the laws of thermodynamics that talk about how something becomes something. And so my idea is that there's a missing law of thermodynamics because I'm here and I haven't disintegrated out into nothing yet, and there's plants growing in my backyard. So whatever it is that's growing the plants in my backyard is the missing law of thermodynamics. But what that thing is doing is it's moving from chaos into order. So a plant seed is a potential. There's a genetic code in there, say. And what the genetic code does is start to reach into the chaos, which is the quantum, which is complete and absolute chaos. If you've ever had an out-of-body experience or anything like that, you'll know that it can be experimented with psychedelics or whatever. It can be completely, it's geometric shapes and weirdness and music, and it's just it's just roiling chaos. And I think that is the leftover resonance of the Big Bang, where it became this like roiling chaos. But then what happened out of that, because it has to meet in the middle with like the yin and the yang and the masculine and feminine energies and all this other kind of stuff, is that at the atomic level, it starts to knit together order out of that chaos, right? And then once it's manifested into this world, then the chaos begins to ensue again, right? So, like, I'll plant the seed, and its genetic code says, okay, I have this piece of information that I'm trying to get from the quantum field, and it's tomato plant information, right? So it reaches into the quantum and just like funnels up tomato plant information. And if you give it the soil and you give it water and you give it the things that it needs to be able to process that random information correctly, then it'll grow into a tomato plant and it'll produce tomatoes and it'll produce more seeds, because that's what the genetic code within the seed tells it to do. Now, eventually though, chaos starts to ensue, because a worm will come along and start to eat it, or aphids will get into the leaves, or it'll grow and then it uses chaos, because eventually the plant dies once that energy signature, the genetic signature, has run its course. Then the plant will die and fall over and spill its seeds somewhere else, and then chaos ensues and starts to break down the meat of the tomatoes and breaks down the plant and reabsorbs it back into the earth, and that becomes that cycle. So, and that happens with everything. It happens with, tomato plants and humans, and like everything that springs up out of the earth is using that same process of using its genetic code and its genetic disposition to be able to draw a certain strand of chaos and potential from the quantum and manifest it out into the physical world, where it can then fall back in, right? So that becomes that whole issue of like the order rising up and falling into chaos and rising up and falling into chaos, right? And we use that same thing in our body, in all of our systems, in our economics and our relationships. I mean, everything is like order falling into chaos, which rises back into order, which goes back into chaos. Now, here's the thing that has been tripping me up today. That's the thing that I saw that is really hard to believe, but I have one more thing to this before I go into this idea, because I think it plays into it, is intention. So I think that intention is, it's hard to describe intention because we think of it in human terms, but everything has intention. Down at the atomic level, there's intention. And I think it might be true that that's, like I said, that's the first place where there's basic awareness, that's the first place where there's actually intention. And what I mean by that is a desire to become a certain thing, So when I have intention of becoming a writer or a YouTuber or a podcaster or a master sergeant or a dad or a husband or whatever it is, then, I have that intention within me that, spills out, and then I can become that thing. But I think maybe that's even the missing law of thermodynamics, But what happens is once you manifest that into the, I'll call it three-dimensional world. I don't like that term, but I'll call it into this 3 or 4-dimensional reality, is the thing that you manifest tends to stick around for a while, So, stones or rocks or bedrock would be an example of things that stick around for the longest, whereas, bacteria, single-cell organisms, maybe some viruses, things like that would be examples of things that stick around for the shortest period of time. maybe some plants or something like that, you know. Maybe there's some fruit flies. I don't know what the shortest life cycle is, but it's something like on the microscopic scale anyway. But even a cell, once it's done on its life cycle, then whatever's left of it is still there. The material is still there, and it has to be cleaned away. Just like with a tomato plant, when it's done, the husk of the plant is still there, you know, and it has to be, you know, recycled. You know, when we built the Golden Gate Bridge, it was the same principle. You know, we harvested the materials from the earth and designed it and put the thing together, and it's, you know, gonna be there for a long, long time. Even when humans are gone, it'll be a long time before it completely deteriorates, you know. But what the thing is that holds it in place is the intention, the power of intention. And it's the intent that keeps the Hoover Dam in place. It's the intent that keeps the Golden Gate Bridge and the city of Philadelphia and this house. And, you know, it's the emotion and the attention that goes into something that sustains it and keeps it, the structure, viable within the physical realm, right? And so I would say that intention is the force that defies entropy. So the stronger the intention, the greater the resistance to entropy. Maybe. That might be true. I have to think about that some more. So, having said all of that, here's my crazy idea. Is that the idea is that none of it exists except in the moment. And what I mean by that is that as we are moving through time, everything that is in existence, everything that we see, so my reading glasses and my watch and like my cool dude, you know, Doctor Who toy, Peter Capaldi, the best actor as a doctor, not the best storyline, but the best actor as a doctor. All of these things, if according to my theory, are being constantly manifested into existence. So like, you know, this belt is being constantly manifested into existence. You know, pen is being constantly manifested into existence. And the reason I say this is because there's an idea within physics that, you know, we live in this holographic universe. And one of the things that never made sense to me within the holographic universe concept is that there's this theory that we know that light moves at a, for this I'll say that light moves at a constant, it fluctuates, but within, for our purposes, it's a constant. But then we know that a lot of this is just a projection of our thoughts, right? So I can never quite understand how you can take like a solid thing, you know, and have this like a projection, or have it like a hologram that's being constantly like refreshed. You know, like it's not an image of something, it's not an image of something that's being like refreshed. It's not like on a computer screen. Like this is I mean, I can like touch this. It's matter. It's stainless steel and glass and leather and all sorts of that kind of stuff. But what I came to realize is that if you go down to the quantum level, you go down to the strings, you know, then at the string level, at one point in time, in fact, at the atomic level, at one point in time, these molecules, that are in here that make up this steel were the molecules that make up steel. And then they were taken and they were heated and they were pressed together and they were, formed and forged and carved and polished. And now I've got, this cool dude Casio watch that I really like a lot. And all these other principles are brought into place that can, that make this thing work. But what's actually happening at the quantum level is each of the atoms within this is being constantly refreshed. It's bubbling at the speed of light, at the quantum level, right? So it's bubbling up, but because there was an intention behind this, the intention is the thing that holds the shape, that holds the consistency. And because of the strength of the intention, it holds the shape and the consistency for a very long time. Because the intention of steel and leather and thread, and glass are all very strong intentions. So it's going to take this many, 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 many years to be reabsorbed into the environment. It's going to take these many, many years to be reabsorbed into the environment because the energy and the intention that was putting into constructing this takes a long time for the earth to reclaim it. But it's not because this is matter as such. That's the important thing to understand. It's the atoms and it's the intention at the string, at the level of the string, as the potentials are bubbling up